All right, I'd now like to introduce our first keynote speaker, Professor Clement Ahiadeke. Professor Ahiadeke is a professor and director of the Institute of Statistical, Social, and Economic Research at the University of Ghana, Legon. He got his PhD in demography from Cornell University and an MPH from Johns Hopkins. He collaborates frequently as a researcher with the Rockefeller Foundation and the Population Council of New York. And his research interests include reproductive health, maternal and child nutrition studies, family planning, program monitoring and evaluation, the relation between abortion, contraceptive practice, and unwanted pregnancies. He also does HIV/AIDS program monitoring and evaluation. He is involved in the design of baseline surveys and the general application of demographic processes to constructing poverty indicators. So I'd very much like to welcome Professor Ahiadeke.
And good morning to all of you. If there were a chairperson, Mr. Chair or Madam Chairperson, it's a very welcome attention this morning for me to give a keynote address. And I would like to start with a story I heard somewhere. For what I'm really looking for this kind of collaboration, I put it in the form of a story, which I'll highlight in most of the things I'll talk about. In the very early part of the 1980s, there was a very young guy, tall and handsome, who left Uganda and went to Canada. He had an agenda, but nobody knew his mind. He loved women, sorry to say this, and he was very much interested in white women. So within a very short period of time, he got a very prominent Canadian family daughter, and he gave her HIV. Within a short period of time, he had infected 5 people. So the authorities decided to find a way out. And the law too was such that they couldn't do much about him. They counseled him, but he wasn't willing to take it. So after some time, the Canadians were themselves confused. So they took a sample from him and decided to give it to a group, a lab in California for testing. The group also realized that the sample was too small for the kind of test they wanted to perform. But they also heard that they could take that sample to another group in Australia for testing, for multiplication. They could multiply the sample and make it larger. They did it and returned it to the group in California. By the time they finished the testing, the guy died all of a sudden of meningitis. So the Canadians got a result, but there was not much they could do about it, except to document the information. Then, after his death, 12 more women came out to say that the guy had infected them also. So you have about 17 people who were infected. And the research work that finalized everything came from 4 different countries. And I think this is the kind of thing we need to do if we want to collaborate as researchers from universities and research institutions. I think this century has a lot of issues, particularly development issues that are very complex and far beyond the capacities of regions and much less individual countries. These are times when nations face serious challenges in governance, peace, health, employment, education, and many others. These challenges are not really those that are domestic, as it used to be, but you need attention of international collaborators. The Libra international relations theory notes that states are embedded in both domestic and international civil society, which places structural constraints on the behavior of the state and, by extension, the individuals. This shapes the kind of vulnerability that states are confronted with every day. The dimensions require the development of transnational learning and research networks that will use diverse resources, perceptions, and methodologies to generate new knowledge that can be disseminated and used for better understanding and for adoption of more efficient action across national boundaries. The excitement of transnational migration, for example, was well accepted. Particularly, it was one of the greatest things that happened in the century. Yet, over the years, this has rather generated a huge international anxiety, igniting major discussions about the effects on social and economic development for both developed and developing countries. The impact of transnational organized crime on political stability and governance, especially in weak but resource-endowed countries, like the DR Congo, for example, is a case in point. However, quite too often, many of these discussions appear curiously disconnected from each other. So it becomes very difficult to know what is happening. And that's one of the reasons why we will need the attention of the international community, particularly small groups, as in this particular case, to work together. Unfortunately, transnational research has not been theoretically and empirically well developed. The resulting research output is too often detached from the local policy context and becomes less nuanced in reflecting local realities and hence less actionable. This phenomenon also undermines the vested interests of local researchers in and out of universities and communities within the African continent. Of course, this conference is very important in this time of heightened global appreciation of the significance of knowledge generation across the world. What then are the challenges of research and capacity development in Africa? Of course, there are many, but I want to highlight just a few of them. There is a renewal of the realization in Africa that knowledge and innovation are at the base of a country's development, and regional or global participation rests on the inherent research function of a country's academic system. The ability and capacity to undertake quality and innovative research and output is crucial for the building of a knowledge-based economy for sustained development. Indeed, it is not a hidden fact that Africa performs poorly in knowledge generation through research in terms of publications and patents. When you compare Africa to other regions, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, performs abysmally, producing just about 1% of the world's publications and 0.1% of global patents. This situation exacerbates the phenomenon of unequal development, widening the development gap between the information-rich North and information-poor South, continuously reinforcing the dominance of the former. The first point that I identify is low human capacity. Perhaps the most visible reason for Africa's poor performance in research and knowledge generation has to do with the relatively small number of researchers of African origin compared to other regions. Africa has the lowest number of researchers, about 79 per million of population, compared to, say, 442 for Latin America and the Caribbean, and 526 for India. The next important point I have identified is lack of funding. But the issue of funding is such that I always want to blame our governments. In fact, we are happy to get grants from outsiders and do research that concerns the whole country, and the governments will be very happy. But when you tell them, where is your contribution, they are unable to talk. In fact, Ghana did have what they call Get Fund in the early 2000s. It's a tax they collect from everything you purchase, and they collected a lot of money. But today, that money has dried out completely. Even those students who got the Get Fund and went abroad to study, they are all stranded somewhere in Europe or Australia or America. And who is to blame? Our governments. But how come? As a point I would like to share with all of you, how come? I cannot find the answer alone. When I was director of ISSER, I would always ask that question. Why are things not going well in our part of the world? This is again the background that research institutions in Africa sometimes have to compete for international funding to conduct studies on their home countries against well-established research institutions. African research institutions naturally lose out on such competitions where they are required to demonstrate capacity to pre-finance projects. It has always been like that. So we always become people who are subletted to, and when people from the northern countries come and sublet part of their work to us, we are more than happy. There is low institutional capacity. And it is, I think, because of a number of factors: equipment, laboratories, libraries, and so forth. But above all, I believe that the lack of intra-African collaboration is a major factor. There are several universities in Africa, in West Africa, but for me, for the time I was the director of ISSER, I never saw any collaborative work between a research institute in Nigeria or Cote d'Ivoire or Burkina Faso with ISSER. In fact, we work with the northern institutions a lot more than institutions around us. And it goes with publications. Individuals want to publish. And of course, because grants are scarce, when I get $200,000, I want to use it alone. I don't want to use it with Kofi Ausabo Asare, who is at Cape Coast University. Although we're doing similar things, I don't want him to know what I'm doing. So for that, we publish less. We don't publish a lot. And people getting promoted is also a problem, because you want to do everything on your own without the support of your colleagues. It's very, very sad for Africa. In the same way, we are not able to produce graduate students in as much as we will want. Unfortunately, when we send graduate students abroad, only a few of them come back. So there are several impediments in the way of the young researchers. We try very hard, get some money, send a student abroad, only to hear that he left Australia for the United States. We never get him back. It's because of these individual stories. I want to publish alone, and I want my name alone to be in the published journals. But if you look at several journals, particularly in my area of, say, public health and epidemiology, you get so many people. You can get about 10 people publishing an article. And we don't know that it helps all of us, and it is better for all of us to work together than to let individuals be on the scene. There is what I also call unhealthy and unwholesome collaborations. And this is between the North and the Southern countries. The Northern countries are well prepared. They have everything. They have networks. And they know how to do their proposals, so they can easily get a grant and make use of it. If you are lucky, they will come to us and tell us, ISSER, collect this data for us. And they take the data away, and we don't contribute anything apart from the money they give us for the field work. I think that is not very good of the northern countries also. So they reduce the relationship to something that is vertical rather than making it horizontal. I think this group will not be like that. They give us subcontracts, which we work with, and we don't get much. Even the money, we get very little. Maybe I get 5,000 for working for 1 year. Of course, there are some cases that are better than that. Then there is what we call the emergence of off-site research centers. That's a very typical example in Ghana. I will not mention names. The people came to Ghana and took Ghanaians and set up a research center. They had money. They did everything quickly. I actually protested because I could see what was going to happen. Then within a few years, they had mastered the terrain, and they took over everything. And what do we see? They bring postdoctoral students from big schools in the US, like Harvard, MIT, Stanford, to work during the long vacation. Our people cannot match them. Even most of the lecturers cannot match their latest technologies. So you see, even government sends most of their projects to them to do, until we started protesting, not on a selfish ground, but we just thought that that was not good. It wasn't healthy enough to help build or even actually do what we call collaborative work as research institutions in the country. a group brought a project to ISSER, and they had to take it away because our competencies were much lower or inferior to what they were doing. But we thought that if we work together, it will help them and help Ghana also. But well, this is it. There is a selfish interest in every individual, and that showed up in their case a lot. I think that transnational research collaboration is an imperative with a lot of benefits for researchers and institutions, and with a potential for global prosperity. International collaboration is critical for strengthening knowledge and competencies of researchers everywhere. And I know that the northern institutions are very much aware. Yesterday, when we went out for a tour, we all saw the need for everybody's contribution. You don't necessarily have to be in the north to be able to make a contribution to the topic that was being discussed. Transnational collaborative research activities create a better cross-cultural understanding, improve contact between institutions, and build personal relations and professional networks. So we don't have to downplay transnational collaborative work. If you remember the story I told you at the beginning about HIV/AIDS, it was collaboration among 3 or 4 countries that finally got some kind of answer to the solution to the question. Finally, one of the very fundamental benefits of collaboration is the potential to contribute to the strengthening of capacities within and across universities and research institutions. This provides context in which research scientists can achieve a global perspective. Capacity strengthening should not erroneously be used interchangeably with capacity building. It is important to note that while capacity building suggests an intention to establish a research infrastructure, capacity strengthening reflects efforts to enhance skills and perspectives of existing institutions and research scientists. Of course, I have listed the forms of transnational research collaboration that can strengthen capacity. And there are 2 main rationales that should underlie transnational collaborative agenda. The first is genuine desire to contribute to strengthening the capacities of existing structures and perspectives. I think this group has that as a fact. I have not been in it for a long time, but from what I've seen so far, I think they do have. The second involves pooling and sharing of research and ideas, and I think this group has that also. But this also has to be at 2 levels of capacity building. Broadly, capacity strengthening collaborative research can be classified also into 2 levels. At the higher level, training programs. And I think the University of Michigan does a lot of training of African students. The second is the exchange of faculty between universities and research institutions. That I don't see much about it, or about it happening. It does happen on small scale. There is a synergy, and you can all attest to this. people coming from the north to the south and people going from the south to the north. The people going from the south to the north have to be identified, and that will show that we have strong researchers or teachers who can also teach the northern students. I think that the north does that. They bring very strong researchers and collaborators. There is also a project type collaboration in which the northern institutions will come and they want to conduct a survey. When they get EOI, they want to involve some of the southern universities. I've realized that that's a requirement, particularly from USAID. They want you to involve some Africans in your research. And it works well. But what happens is the southerners feel, oh, money has come. So they spend all their time chasing dollars rather than improving their knowledge. So they don't really get academic progression. What else? I really want to sum this by giving 3 examples. When I was the director of ISSER, ISSER is simply Institute of Statistical, Social, and Economic Research. We went into a collaboration with the Center for Development Research, ZEF, at the University of Bonn, Germany. The government provided 70% of the grant, the German government, and the Ghanaian government provided 30%. So we set up a PhD program in development studies. Incidentally, that program is what the University of Ghana has taken up and changed all PhD programs in the university to that. It involves doing 2 years of coursework, unlike the previous time where you just go and stay in a program and start writing a thesis, and when you finish, that is it. But you do 2 years of coursework, write examinations, and if you pass, you advance to the PhD work. They provide grants for the southern scholars to visit Bonn, and also there's a grant for the northern scholars to visit ISSER and teach in our program. There is also part of the grant that we can use to attend conferences, prepare a project work, and be able to submit our projects or write-ups for grants. And we won several grants, of course, together with people from ZEF. And without them, we could not have won those grants. It works so well. And the program is in the 6th year. And our PhD holders are doing well. And of course, the University of Ghana attests to it by taking our example and implementing it as the university's requirement. There is a second component that ISSER hosts. ISSER was selected among 11 beneficiaries of the International Development Research Center, IDRC's funded grants under the Think Tank Initiative. They give us $2 million Canadian dollars and ask us to use it in any way we want. The first year, I made sure that every researcher did a proposal and won part of the grant and wrote a paper and published in an international journal. It worked so well. For 2 years, many people wrote. They couldn't believe it because in the end, they were promoted. People were promoted to associate professors. People were promoted to senior research fellows. It's just out of that grant. people can take that grant and travel and make presentations elsewhere. There are some journals that expect you to pay, and we are able to use that money to pay. We use part of the money to renovate parts of the institute. It worked so well, and they have renewed it. Without it, we couldn't be publishing our State of Ghanaian Economy report. But that helps us. And the third one, which I'm very proud of, although it's an initial stage, is a collaboration with the Civil Research Center at the University of Michigan. I sat down some time ago and I saw that ISSER does research 80% of the times. But it's like our facilities are outdated. We continue to use paper questionnaires when we can indeed do better than that. So I decided to go around places. I came to Michigan before. Not many people here saw me, but later David Lamb got a wing of it because we invited him to come and do a presentation to us in Accra last year. I also went to Chicago, but I saw that the Civil Research Center at University of Michigan is probably the best, the one that conforms to what we feel we want. So we are working together. Two of my colleagues have come here before just to look around and study what happens at the Civil Research Center. Very soon, a team of 3 young guys who we want to mentor so that they come here, not to steal, but to learn the way the Michigan Center operates and come back. We're not keeping them here for a long time because there is a tendency that they will go away, they will vanish into the system. So they will come back and assist in building the structures there. What we intend to do is to work with other African countries, particularly West Africa and Central Africa, to build a strong base for research work and data preservation. We also added monitoring and evaluation. That one actually got a catch from the big funding agencies like Gates Foundation, like DFID, like USAID. So they will be supporting us. And I can assure the Service Center that we are not coming to depend on the money, but we will depend on their know-how, the technology that they have. They have to share with us. And in fact, it's true, they promised us 100 laptops. And they are delivering them. They haven't finished delivering all, but I think we have about 50. So, simply put, that is my suggestion, the kind of collaborative work that we need to do as research institutions and as universities. Thank you very much for giving me the time.